Hello, everyone, and welcome to another TWIS podcast broadcast. We are here. Woohoo! And this is before the actual show starts. Just want to let you know this is the time that you do all the likes and the thumbs up and the hearts and the shares and little comments and other things. And we check our mics and we go, hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm good, Dr. Kiki. How are you?
We're going to do voices tonight, like with Natalia, like I did the last couple of. Okay, this is going to be extra fun.
That's probably as far as I'll go.
As our regular viewers know, as we record here right now, all of you who are watching are here with us live in the chats, and I love you being here, part of the chat and everything. Thank you for making the show what it is. The podcast will come from this recording and be edited to some degree. We don't know how much yet. It all depends on what happens during the show and what needs to be edited out in the final frontier. Are we ready to do this? You ready to rock and roll, everyone?
Yes. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Starting in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 953, recorded on Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. Jump on into the Science Gazpacho. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we're going to fill your head with dolphins, penguins, and ketamine. But first, disclaimer. Video killed the radio star. Search engines killed news. Short form killed attention spans. Our kids would rather be YouTubers than someone on TV. Climate is changing one day at a time. And now AI is on the verge of taking our gerbs. Or is it? Who do we want to be today? Who do we want to be tomorrow? A sledgehammer? Where will the future take us? On the highway to the danger zone? Or are we just along for the ride? Or do we just get to decide? Will you think and let your mind be free? We definitely like to think that's the case here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, everyone. And Tom Merritt. Wow.
Hey,
joined.
Good science to you, Dr. Kiki.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to get Tom Merritt on the show today. We have a great show ahead. I have a bunch of stories about Biobots, electric dolphins, sleepy penguins, some ketamine for mice, and bird self-gratification. I don't know. Anyway, lots of fun stories. And we also have Tom Merritt, who is a tech expert, podcaster, writer, and generally a gentleman of many talents. Thank you once again for joining. So glad to have you here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is one of my favorite shows to listen to. And the only bad thing about being on is that I will have already listened to it when it's done. So
yeah, there's that whole thing. You're like, do I listen to myself again after I've already done it?
Just fast forward through my parts.
Okay. No, you're listening now. You're going to listen to all of it. It's all going to be good. And I hope everyone who is here tonight is going to be listening to everything that we say, because it's going to be so very, very important. Muy importante. As we jump into the show tonight, I want to remind you that subscribing to TWIS as a podcast is a great way to support the show. Find us on your favorite podcast platform. We also broadcast live 8 p.m. Wednesdays, Pacific time on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And if you sign up for notifications and all those special things, you'll be notified every time a new show is being broadcast, which is pretty cool. If all of this is too much and you just want to know what's happening every week, go to our website, twis.org. You can find show notes and other things about the show there. Time for the science?
Let's do the science.
Let's do the science again. Yes. All right. This last week has been the COP28 meeting, the International United Nations meeting, their annual meeting, to bring governments and corporations together to try and actually make progress on some of the promises that they made almost a decade ago to reduce carbon emissions. We've heard really not great news about some important members of certain factions saying, oh, the science isn't anything. And other individuals who, like Al Gore's climate monitoring group, who are like, I see you and all of your carbon emissions that you're not supposed to be emitting right now. So there's a bunch going on of just back and forth. There are promises being made yet again. But I think on the positive side of all of this is a recent story that's based in transparency of data. And in science, I think that is increasingly important. NASA has just partnered with the U.S. Environmental and Protection Agency and other government groups to release what they call the U.S. Greenhouse Gas Center. And this U.S. Greenhouse Gas Center is going to act as the hub for governments and corporations and individuals to access NASA's data from their satellites, from their the International Space Station, from all of the data sources that they have as they are in real time putting them together for people. So this is going to be their goal, as they say, is to provide decision makers with one location for data and analysis. And it's a way to target greenhouse gases and also try and figure out how stakeholders can be involved in feedback and creating ideas for how we can monitor things better, where we are losing ground in monitoring, and also how we can potentially move forward in some of the more emissive parts of our planet.
Also permissive, but also emissive.
Yeah, that's a good word also. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think about all this? Have you been tracking the climate science and politics kind of news
I've been keeping an eye on the cops. Yeah.
The cops. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's easy to lose heart in every one of these COP meetings if you approach it the way it's covered, which is kind of implying that, all right, this is the time when everyone will decide how to fix the planet. Oh no, they're not.
The one time.
And so I try to look at it as this isn't how we fix the planet, but it is worth doing, because if you don't have a COP summit, you don't have the conversation. In fact, the conversation about why isn't this working? Why isn't this coming up with the plan that will get everybody on board is the important effect of the COP summits to me. So I kind of look at this news as very good as well, which is, no, NASA isn't making its data on carbon emissions available because that's going to fix everything. NASA is making its data on carbon emissions available because that makes it easier for people who do want to fix things to see what's going on and work with each other. And it's the unintended consequences of things like this, the unplanned consequences that are the promising thing, right?
I really love that perspective. We try to be optimistic yet realistic on this program. And it's, one of the things I love focusing on are the solutions. And it's this kind of, like I said, transparency of data that is going to lead to the solutions. And without the conversation to have started it in the first place, we'd still be, overshooting even more
Yeah,
than
we'd
we
still
are
be
now.
overshooting. Yeah, it'd be worse, and we might not even know because people
Yeah.
wouldn't have been spurred to do things like this. So I'm not trying to say, so don't worry. I mean, still worry, obviously, but this is good news. Even if it's not the news we all want someday, maybe this is the thing that gets us there somehow. Because if you don't know what the effects are, if you don't know what's actually happening on the planet, it's harder to figure out whether what you're doing is having any effect and working, and which things are the better avenues to pursue.
Right. If we hadn't gone down this road, we wouldn't have gotten to the place where where the science and a lot of people, there's still people who are contrarians, but they're in the minority at this point in time, that anthropogenic climate change is what's going on. We are the main cause of what's happening in our climate at this point in time. And it's because of these kinds of conversations that got started.
And having this data is good to be like, oh, okay, so that's the number we have to affect. That's the one we have to bring down. That's the one we have to bring up. Okay.
And I want to see more of it in the mainstream media, these solutions. That's what I want, but we'll see about that. I'm an optimist, yet not, like I said, overly optimistic. And there was a study this week related to optimism and, positivity is like this huge thing. There's books about being positive.
Think positive. Yeah.
Your life will be happier. You'll be better. It can also lead to poor decision making, according to a study in the Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin this last week. Researchers at the at the university's School of Management, they looked at a number of individuals from the UK, over 36,000 households, to look at their expectations of their financial well-being and compared them with their actual financial outcomes. And they found that those individuals who scored highest on their cognitive ability experienced a 22% increase in the probability of realism, where basically their predictions of how they do financially were more accurate, and a 35% decrease in the probability of extreme optimism. So basically, if you're cognitively, if you score higher on the cognitive scales, you're more pessimistic, less optimistic. Anyway.
It's good to have balance, is what this tells me, right?
I think that's where this study comes out, is like, if you are overly optimistic, everything's always going to work out fine. You're going to be wrong.
That truck's not going to hit me. Just think positive. No, get out of the way of the truck. Yeah.
Oopsies.
Yeah. Thinking positive, you could overdo it. And thinking negative, I think study like this is so important because we all assume that thinking negatively too much is going to be bad, right? Because then you'll be less likely to take action to improve things. We all know that confidence is important in achieving whatever it is we're trying to achieve.
Oops,
but what this says is like, don't go overboard, right? Remember that also, if you're overconfident, if you're faking it till you make it too much, then you will also miss things.
It's the too much that's the important part there. Yes. So the key take homes here from this study from the University of Bath is people with higher cognitive ability are better at balancing that optimism with realism in making their decision-making processes. So if you are unrealistic, you're probably going to have high credit card debt, maybe business failures. Maybe you're like into startups a lot and you fail. You think you can make the better app. But yes.
I think if you're failing realistically, that's probably fine, because you do have to learn from failures, but you have to learn from them. Exactly. Yeah. That's the important part.
The important part is learning. And the reason I brought that study up was we were talking about the optimism related to climate change and what's going to happen. So we can't just, be like, oh, that truck isn't going to hit us, like you said. We've got to be realistic about it. But I like to be optimistic at the same time.
I'm optimistic that we're going to unify quantum physics and gravity.
I knew that you would. I knew you knew where to go next. I knew that. Yes. Okay. Can you explain this to me? Because I am.
No, but I can get us close.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
So there is a new theory, and again, this is very clearly theory. This is not we think this is right, but there are two papers actually being published simultaneously by physicists at the University College London, and there's two important parts of their attempts to show a possible way to unify quantum physics and classical physics, right? That is one of the holy grails of physics is to take the standard model and quantum physics and smush them together in a way that makes sense. Usually everybody's been going like, well, let's figure out how to quantize gravity. Right.
Let's turn it into a particle. We need a graviton.
Yeah, a graviton.
Need bits and pieces. Yeah.
Let's figure out and then that'll be the bridge through relativity into classical physics. These folks say they figured out a consistent explanation that goes the other way. It actually it takes classical physics into quantum. So that's where it starts to be me going like, I'm not going to begin to say that I understand these papers and can explain it. But instead of modifying space-time, they modified quantum theory.
Which is fair enough. Let's modify it all and see what we can make work.
Here's the best part.
Okay.
There's a way to test it.
Oh, you're speaking to my scientist heart right here.
We can actually try this out and see if the predictions of this theory work. And if they do, well, then we've got a winner. And if they don't, well, then we learn from that too, right? But it's not an easy thing. It's not as easy as just like walking down to France and getting the standard kilogram and putting it on a scale. But it involves some entanglement and having like a standard thing that with precision what it should weigh, and then testing for fluctuations. And if there's a fluctuation of classical weight that it meets this prediction, then this theory would be true.
This makes me wonder, though. I mean, we have NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. There are French agencies that are also measuring the quantum. Not necessarily fluctuations, but they're measuring the mass of a kilogram. They're measuring the mass of bits of radioactive materials that we're using to define as our clock, to define seconds and microseconds. So it would seem that we should already have this data in hand.
It's a different way of measuring. Okay, and I'm skating on the edge of possibly being wrong here, so I just want to put that right up front. But from my understanding of this, what they're testing for are random fluctuations. So if I'm understanding it right, the standard kilogram, you measure with precision and go, yep, that's a kilogram, right? That's what we'll use as the basis of a kilogram. But if you keep measuring it, every once in a while it would fluctuate, right? The way quantum particles fluctuate in and out. And it's measuring
the Planck scale, right? Where you have
so it's that level
theory
of precision that you need is like at that level. Do we see a fluctuation? And there's also something that has to be entangled for this to work. And that part I don't understand at all. So it's a big effort to be able to put together a measurement, but it's achievable. It's a thing that could be done.
The thing that I like about this approach is that it is looking at, taking a different perspective on gravity and the standard model versus the quantum, and trying to have the unified theory, like you said, forever. But we understand gravity as a force, and it's often explained as a force in early physics. It's the gravitational force, but really it is an intrinsic property of space-time. Gravity is stronger at the bottom of a gravity well, right? So where the sun, if you imagine the sun as a bowling ball on a stretched out pair of nylons, the gravity is, the highest at the bottom of where that bowling ball that would be the sun is resting. And that in itself is not a force, it's a property. And gravity changes based on how much space-time is being stretched or, changed. And that's something that I think is not as commonly understood when people talk about gravity, and where we get into this whole, is it gravitons? Is it this? Can we quantize it? But yeah, I have been on the it's not, gravity's not a particle side for a very long time.
Yeah. I'm also on the I think dark matter and dark energy are something else. They're neither. They're neither dark energy or matter. There's just something about it. I've said this on This Week in Science a long time ago when you had me on the
we'll
look
have to
ahead
go back
episode.
and find the clip.
Because I remember I was in the Oakland airport recording it when I said it. I was headed to CES or something, but I feel the way ether felt, right? The ether was a thing that just, it was theorized to permeate everything and provide structure to the universe. And then we found out that, no, you didn't need an ether. There were these other mechanisms. Dark matter and dark energy feel that way. Like, they're not wrong, but they're not. There's going to be another explanation that goes, oh, we actually don't need dark matter or dark energy because it's these other forces.
Right.
And that's kind of why I was really intrigued by this. It probably, like everything else, will end up not being exactly right and inch us closer to the end. But there's something very compelling about what we did is we took quantum fluctuations and we applied them to the classical world and said, oh, well, if that happens, then that actually gets rid of the quantum problem. And now we can unify it. Like, that would really be elegant if it ended up to be true.
And that is the goal so often of physicists, is to write the most elegant equation to explain it.
Totally.
That
they're all just artists.
Artists? Yeah, maybe. Math artists.
Yep. Martists.
I'm not going to go any further. Some biologists like to be artists when it comes to using cells and trying to create life. No, not life. Trying to create robots out of cells. We've talked on the show for a couple of years about xenobot research, which have been created out of little frog embryos, little frog eggs, these little xenobots. They're like, oh, look, we can get these little frog cells to come together, and they go and they move around and boop, 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 and they have little rules, and they move around and they go do, 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 and then they can make new ones. And so they're self-assembling like we would like robots to be, and they can do their own things, and that's cool. The group of researchers who have been developing the xenobots at Tufts University and Harvard University's Wyss Institute have created now Anthrobots.
A new series coming to Saturday mornings?
No. Dun, dun, dun.
Rise
Eat
of
it
the
with
Anthrobots.
your breakfast cereal. Yeah. Rise. Anyway, they have taken human tracheal cells, little
not mine.
cells, not yours, but they took somebody's tracheal cells, and they say they've created tiny biological robots out of these tracheal cells. The robots are tiny, and they're like the size of a human hair, but they can also be up to the point of a sharpened pencil. So that's within visible, size range, and
you can see them coming.
you can see the Anthrobots rising. Yes, and so they grew neurons in a dish across the bottom of a petri dish, and then they had created these little Anthrobots out of the tracheal cells. The tracheal cells were interesting because they have cilia on them, and cilia like to move and wave, and the cilia help to move mucus and other things down the airway and get, clean the airways out. The cilia are very important for the functioning of the trachea. What they have seen, however, is that the cilia of these cells taken out of the trachea get when the cells start to move as individuals or move individually, that they wibble, they wobble, they the bots do all sorts of fun and interesting behaviors that would not normally happen in your trachea.
Or at least you hope not.
You hope not. Yes. So these they've published in Advanced Science, and they without using stem cells, without using embryonic cells, without really they've been able to take the rules that govern how just these tracheal cells work, and they're like, well, let's take them out of context and put them someplace else. And so they scratched the Petri dish of neuronal cells, so there was damage to it. And then they let their Anthrobots loose to see what happened, and they found that the Anthrobots moved around, and they moved over the surface of the neurons, these human neurons that were in the dish, and they encouraged new neuronal growth to happen in the gaps that were left by the wounding, the scratching of the layers. And I mean, I think they have to change their terminology a little bit, because it's really going to get into the what are you doing sci-fi realm. It already is.
Yeah.
They've confirmed the neurons grew under the area covered by a clustered assembly of Anthrobots, which they called a superbot.
Yeah, that sentence caught my eye as well.
It's like, what is you've got like tracheal Voltron here? I don't like.
That's one of those terms that's really funny in the lab when you're naming it.
But then it gets out in the wild and people go, excuse me?
Yeah.
What?
You want to put a superbot in my where?
Yes.
So an Anthrobot is a xenobot, but not all xenobots are Anthrobots.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yes.
So this is a type of xenobot.
Right. So the xenobots, well, xeno being other were the frog cells. Anthro is human. So if they were putting frog cells in humans, you'd probably have immune reactions and all sorts of, trouble that xeno stuff happens in your body. But with Anthrobots, you can even take somebody's own cells, which we've been talking about for years with stem cell type treatments, take somebody's cells and use their own cells to treat certain diseases or injuries. And that is the interesting part. But I am still really reckoning in my own, just like intellectually, as their definition of a robot, and how just by taking cells that do certain things naturally and putting them together in a certain way, someplace that they aren't normally found, and letting them go and do something, they can achieve some purpose, which I guess is robotic in nature, but they're not programming DNA in this sense at all. They're just looking at what these constructs can do naturally. So
they're automata, maybe.
Automata, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not wrong to call them robots, because robots just derived from a Slavic word for worker.
Fair, okay.
But nobody thinks that. So,
Right.
and with, at least with English, what the word means is what everybody thinks it means. And everybody thinks a robot means a machine that can, move around. So yeah, I feel like it is misleading to call this a robot because of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this study and the studies that they have been working on, I'm fascinated to see where they're going to go, and, how they will end up differentiating from stem cell therapeutics, from studies that are using genetic modification, from, what are the actual use cases in which these biobots, Anthrobots, are going to be more useful, more efficient, more cost-effective for the patient, and how easy to use in a clinical setting.
Yeah. how much does it cost to grow, like to harvest and grow, and what is that procedure, and how is it covered, and how practical is it, in everyday use is a whole other thing. But man, the idea that they could just, scrape a few cells out of my trachea and fix my brain, I'm into that idea.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially as I get older.
As you get older, and you don't have to return to an office anytime soon. But
no, I don't. I work at home. And thank
Some
goodness
people.
I do, because the return to the office is dead. Kiki, did you hear this? It's over. No one's going back.
I keep hearing the shouting from the CEOs that are like,
well, Amazon in
"Back
particular got
to
a lot
the
of press.
office."
Yeah. All right, let's just agree to disagree. You're all going back. My side note, my theory is this is really a fight between introverts and extroverts. And CEOs tend to be extroverts. Not always, but, HR people also, they like working with people.
Extroverts a bit,
and extroverts want to be around, they charge up around other people. I totally get that. So the story here, though, is that Nick Bloom, an economics professor at Stanford University who studies workplace trends, is saying, so we had an abnormal amount of working from home in 2020 because of lockdowns and cautiousness. And again, let's just say this right up front. We're talking about jobs that can be done from home. A lot of jobs can't be done from home, and we're not talking about those jobs. We're talking about office jobs, remote work, and that. When lockdowns eased, we saw the decline of work from home. We just saw the decline of remote work. But he says we're getting to the end of that. The share of paid work from home days has been totally flat this year, according to a survey of working arrangements and attitudes from WFH Research, hovering around 28%. That's still 4 times greater than before 2020. So we have gone from, I think it was something at the height of like 60% down to 28%, and it's just staying there. And Bloom says we're 3.5 years in, and this is kind of stuck. So I don't think we're going back. And in fact, he thinks that some of the forces coming in the economy that will pressure companies to save money by getting rid of office space will counteract any tightening of the labor market that might cause people to take jobs where they have to go into an office even if they don't want to, and that technologies will continue to improve, things like video conferencing and telepresence. And he expects that 2024, we might start to see remote work start to grow again.
I'd like to see it grow again. I want to see the balancing. I think that a lot of this stuff is a pendulum, and we got used to doing work a particular way in office but then the realization was, why do we have to spend hours of our lives commuting every week? Going to a job that, is for many people just a job, right? And there is evidence that mental health is better for people who have less of a commute, right? That don't have to commute as far or as long every day. And the comment within this whole thing that that would take something at the level of the pandemic to change it from this trend of leveling out work from home, I think is pretty accurate. As much as companies might want to really push it because of their investments in buildings, in infrastructure, in a lot of things, that there's a shift. And why not have 1 or 2 work days in the office so that you can get in there and meet people and have the water cooler conversations and have those mentoring moments that don't happen unless you're in the office. There are some things that really can help careers and businesses, but do you have to be in the office all the time?
Yeah, I think we learned what can be done outside the office. I think we learned what kinds of things are better in the office. I think there's still some studies to be done to refine that, but we kind of have a general idea just from our own working experiences. And the argument about whether it should be everybody in or everybody out is an emotional argument, and it's not actually what's best. Some kind of hybrid, like you're talking about, where there are well-planned events to bring people together and get that serendipity and get those human bonds are important. And then there are times when people need to be able to work on their own outside of the office, so they are not disturbed, so they can be more focused. Again, you may not live in a situation where that's possible either, in which case you might have to go to Starbucks or something. I don't know. But there's a lot of nuance to this. But in general, there are benefits to one and benefits to the other. And we're figuring out that balance now, is what this looks like to me.
Yep. I appreciate that economists are starting to look at this, and that it's not just a CEOs say, or it's not simply the emotional reaction anymore, but hopefully the science will continue to look into which way things are going.
And one of the economic pressures to keep offices open has been leases that companies have. But as the economy gets even tighter, the pressure becomes maybe just figure out how to get out of that lease, maybe figure out how to sublease it, or the leases are starting to expire, in which case I think it was Unity recently announced that they're closing a bunch of their offices around the world to save money. And they are no longer requiring people to be in the office 3 days a week. In fact, they're going the opposite way, and they're saying you could only come to the office 3 days a week.
But weren't they the ones who were? I'm not. Yeah, they were. Wasn't. I don't. Was Unity the one who were having everyone has to come into the office thing, or you're all fired
under the old CEO? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm like, wait a minute. They switched that pretty quickly.
They have a new CEO who's like, you know what? We need to bring down these costs. So, they're also unfortunately having layoffs and things like that as well. But that's the kind of economic pressure that Nick Bloom is talking about here.
MJF in YouTube is saying traffic seems to be back at pre-COVID level where I am. So it seems more people are back in the office. But that is actually a very interesting point, because while traffic levels are back up to pre-COVID levels, people are not going back to the office in the same numbers. So the question is, are they going to cafes? Where are they going? Why is traffic back up? And that is something that nobody really understands yet.
And it's not back up at the same pattern, right? Or what I've noticed is traffic being really bad at odd times of the day that used to be, everybody's at work. So I think there's people are taking advantage of the fact, if they do work remotely, that they can, pop out at any time and go run an errand.
But woe be you. You're going to get stuck in a traffic jam.
Exactly, right.
Because everybody else is running errands at the same time.
Yeah. I need to
but hopefully, though, those people in traffic are not getting in accidents that leave them with traumatic brain injury. That is, one impact, pun not intended, of traffic accidents. Traumatic brain injury can be caused by multiple different sources of injury, but it often leads to dysfunction of the networks in the brain, because basically you got a big bowl of Jell-O in your brain that's like a bunch of, but it's not Jell-O. It's like a very sensitive, fine spaghetti. I don't know. They're all, but all this spaghetti, little tiny spaghetti.
Thinner than angel hair.
Thinner than angel hair, but they're all connected to each other. And then it's all in a bowl of gelatin. And then it goes, blah, 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 and it gets wiggled and the connections break apart. And so you have these injuries at the points where inflammation takes place, where the connections are broken, and it often can lead to very severe impacts on cognitive abilities of individuals. This study I was just taken by, it's in Nature Medicine this week. Researchers looked at 6 participants with what's called moderate to severe traumatic brain injury. They had been in coma and come out of coma and achieved some amount of self-ability after their injuries.
Mhm.
But in this particular in these participants, they were between 3 and 18 years post-injury. They put deep brain electrode stimulators into specific locations within these thalamic nuclei of the
And
brain.
they knew which locations to target.
Yeah, and the researchers say that the targeting of the location was actually like incredibly important, and that if they didn't get it right, then it wasn't going to work. And so it was a really important, sensitive operation to place these electrodes in these patients. So it's just amazing to me. They were able to use this deep brain stimulation of the thalamic nuclei to give these people back lost abilities. So they used a particular test for processing of information, what they call the trail test, which is used for studying cognitive ability, following a line from one place to another and being able to have fine motor control and understand the processing of one instant after another, and planning and all these things that are kind of higher cognitive abilities. And they found that they were looking for a 10% improvement. They're like, if it just 10% improvement over baseline. These individuals, on average, exceeded the average by 32%.
Wow.
They improved, yeah. And this was, they had the deep brain stimulation. They spent 90 days with the device turned on for 12 hours a day. So half a day it was on, then turned off. And they found that when they turned it off, the people
that means shock, like electric stimulation.
Yeah, basically,
Okay,
there's electricity going on in your brain all the
adding
time.
a little more.
It's just adding a little more.
Okay.
Yes. It worked the way they predicted, yes, yet even better. And they wanted to have the control of taking the patients off of the stimulator and seeing what happened. And the two of the patients were like, no. No, I like where I am.
It's working.
I can
Don't
read.
mess with it.
Don't mess with it. I can read books. I can do things. I can watch a TV show and remember. I can keep track of what's happening. I can play a video game. They can, do homework. There was so much improvement. And the three who participated in the withdrawal, they actually had 34% slower averages on the trail making test after only 3 weeks without the stimulation. So
it doesn't have lasting effects then, sadly.
Yeah. Well, so it's only 90 days. And one of the things we do know is that the nervous system takes a long time to repair itself. Some of these people were 18 years post-injury. So these people are 18 years and their brains still had not repaired themselves. So the likelihood of it being massively reparative is minimal in that case.
Yeah, sure. So is it feasible for them to just keep this in their head?
It is feasible. So that's the next step is this. This is one of those tests where it's like, is it safe? Does it kind of work? And it did, and it exceeded their benchmarks, improved their executive function. There are many people who have deep brain stimulation. There are, the brain eventually wants to eat the electrodes and wants to degrade them away. And so that's something that still needs to be considered, but it is, it at least will add value and ability to people's lives for as long as they're able to use it. So I just thought this was really, really cool. And they're now hoping they can make it a therapy.
I'm not going to let perfect be the enemy of the good. It would be better if we put this in for 90 days and then took it out and it stayed. It rewired things. Like that would be amazing. But lacking that, just the ability to say, well, yes, it's risky to do brain surgery. And, long-term basis, you'd have to be going in there over and over, and that's going to bring risks. At least it works, right? And so I can see why people would say yes, leave it in there as long as you can, and then if it starts to break, put another one in, please. Because this description in here of it being like turning the lights on is repeated by a few of these subjects.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine being in that spot of not having the cognitive abilities, not having memory that can keep you, allow you to learn new things, that can keep you engaged in a conversation or in a television show, or even just to do day-to-day tasks around your own house. How debilitating that would be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've had brief periods where exhaustion or stress or just life.
You're talking about my life right now.
Yeah,
No.
where it leaves you where it's hard to focus. Like imagine that being permanent and 10 times worse. That's what we're talking about here. So it's fascinating that it seems like just like the brain is protecting itself still from the trauma and keeping the voltage low. And if you just go and up the voltage, the pathways just work like they always worked. Yeah.
But I think one of the big questions here is, like you said, how many individuals will it or could it potentially lead to a recovery in? Because there is a standard saying in neuroscience is neurons that fire together wire together. Mm-hmm. And if you get neurons firing, then potentially that will lead to new wiring. Potentially it will lead to astroglial cells coming and helping to put the neurons back together. Or maybe we can take your tracheal cells and stick them in there.
And how many people did they do in this study? It wasn't that many.
No, it's 6 people, so it's very
This is just the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. But the impact on the individuals, I think, can't be understated.
Indeed.
This is pretty cool.
Well, you can fire your neurons or you can fire a rocket off to the moon. And the United States is going to do that for the first time in 50 years on December 24th. It'll be the first launch of the ULA. SpaceX rockets have been doing most of the heavy lifting lately, but the United Launch Alliance is going to be doing their version December 24th with an unmanned, uncrewed mission.
If it's the first, I'm glad. That's great.
To land, yes. If it's the first ULA, you probably don't want a crew on there. The first time to put something on the moon by the United States, anyway, in 50 years, and they will attempt that landing. It'll be an autonomous landing, so they'll just be watching and keeping the fingers crossed that the math worked on January 25th.
That's so soon. I know that the first stage of the Artemis mission went off without a hitch. Mm-hmm. Their uncrewed test that went around and around and around, and it did great. It got out there, did all the things it was supposed to, but now it's going to land.
Yeah, they're gonna put something on the moon. It's not the first thing to be on the moon in a long time. China's put something up there. India's put something up there. Russia crashed something up there.
Japan crashed something up there. Yes.
Didn't Japan crash it on purpose though? One of them. Yeah, some of them have been like, we mean it to impact and we'll study the impact. But this one will not be meant to crash. This one will be meant to successfully touch down. And then they'll be studying the surface of the moon in that area, particularly as part of the ongoing Artemis mission.
But this one is landing and it's not going to come back. So
this is not going to come back. No.
Yeah, but the eventual idea with Artemis is that we will have crewed missions that will go to the moon, land, come back, potentially.
Oh, the Japanese one did end in a crash. I see that. It's in the article, right? Yeah. Yeah. 4 countries have successfully landed on the moon: US, Russia, China, and most recently, India. So
been a long time for the US. Let's get there.
And the idea is this will start to pave the way for us to send crews to the moon. And then once we land on the moon again with those crews, they will start to prepare for the next leg, which is for Artemis to be able to send people to Mars someday.
I love the name of the rocket from the ULA is Vulcan Centaur.
Which is, of course, means it's half goat, half Spock.
Oh, yes. It's definitely the goat, at least half. Yes.
The greatest of all time Spock.
Yes.
The Vulcan Centaur.
Speaking of the goat, bottlenose dolphins. Well, I don't know.
You said you were going to put a dolphin in my brain.
I'm going to put a dolphin in your brain. That's right. Scientists at the University of Rostock's Institute for Biosciences and Nuremberg Zoo's Behavioral Ecology and Conservation Lab in Germany just published their study in the Journal of Experimental Biology, looking at the abilities of bottlenose dolphins, two dolphin species previously, Sotalia guianensis, the Guyana dolphin, and Tursiops truncatus, which is the bottlenose, have been shown to have what are called vibrisal crypts.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Rostrum. These are innervated ampullary electroreceptors.
Oh.
So yes, vibrisal crypts. It means they're little spaces that are potentially sensitive to electrical fields.
Deep brain stimulation, perhaps?
Potentially deep brain stimulation, yes. And so in this particular study, they looked specifically at the bottlenose dolphins, and they showed that the dolphins, when trained, they'd been previously trained on this task in another study in which they discovered that they had these vibrisal crypts that worked. They were trained to kind of go put their head in a bunch of pipes and touch a target and to hold it there when there was an electrical signal that was there. And they changed the amount of the electrical signal to see how sensitive these vibrisal crypts actually were. It turns out they are not as sensitive as sharks or some other fish species that we know about, but they're able to detect DC electric fields as low as 2.4 and 5.5 microvolts per centimeter.
So
it's similar to those as in the platypus.
I was going to say, this is not that rare in the sea, but it's rare in the mammals, right?
Yeah, and so that is the big discovery or the big investigation here is how sensitive are the mammalian species of the sea to these electric signals. And micro and macro scale electro orientation could be used for navigating based on electromagnetic fields of the Earth. It could also be used for hunting, for determining where and when particular prey are in a certain space. So it's a really interesting question as to what dolphins are using this electromagneto-reception for. But they can.
Yeah.
They do. And
I imagine some of them use it for good. Others, not all dolphins have the same personality.
There's a lot of rude dolphins out there. I do have to say, there's a bunch of rude dolphins who do whatever the heck they want.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I mean, it's just their personality. I don't know how smart they are, how well they do against.
It varies. Some dolphins are smarter than others.
How do you think they do on the Turing test?
I think they would do better than the humans, possibly, based on this study. That is a preprint. It has not been peer reviewed, but two researchers from UC San Diego looked at several large language models. So they were based on several models. Two of them were large language models, GPT-4 and GPT-3.5. GPT-3.5 is the one you get if you don't pay for ChatGPT. It's the one I think you get in Bing. GPT-4 is the improved next version that is more capable from OpenAI, and that model is the one you get if you pay.
It's
Those
not the
two,
one that most students are using to
probably
do
not.
their homework. Yeah.
They also used ELIZA. Are you familiar with ELIZA? Do you remember ELIZA? I mean, not that you remember ELIZA because it was made in the 60s before either of us were born.
It's an old test. I don't know. Yeah.
I first encountered ELIZA on my Commodore 64 as a piece of shareware. And basically it's a psychologist, right? It's a psychologist who's only paying half attention to you because it will repeat back a lot of what you say as a question. It will respond to certain words that you say in a way that sounds kind of convincing. And the first time you ever used it, especially before OpenAI put out ChatGPT, it was kind of impressive because it could feel like you were talking to somebody, even though it was very rote, very simple algorithm. Well, they did a Turing test with humans and GPT-4, GPT 3.5, and ELIZA. The multiple models of GPT-4 all outperformed ELIZA except for two, and the model of GPT 3.5 paled in comparison. It just lagged behind ELIZA. The other takeaway from this is that none of them passed. None of them were more than 50% in fooling humans. I think the other
even humans aren't good at fooling humans.
The other interesting thing is that humans only were correctly identified as humans 73% of the time. So. Some humans failed the Turing test as well, which I think, and they actually acknowledge this in the paper, like this may say as much about the Turing test as it does about any of these models, but it is an interesting, apples to apples comparison of how these models do. And the fact that GPT 3.5 is maybe easier to tell that it's a machine than even a more mechanical machine like ELIZA.
It also it is inspiring more people now that the study has come out possibly to pay for ChatGPT 4. No.
Yeah, maybe. That could be a side effect. That part was not included in the study. It did actually impress me. Now, there are varying implementations of GPT-4 here. So some of them didn't perform better than ELIZA, but most of them did. And there was one that they labeled Dragon that even got close to 50%. But again, even GPT-4 is not fooling people most of the time into thinking it's a human.
I like to hear that still as I think about where we are with AI, and I mean, especially on the academic front and with the spoofing of papers, the spoofing of intellectual ideas, the spoofing of content. And, there's the question with these tests, right? These Turing tests, is the test made to figure out whether the AIs are getting closer to humans, so biasing the design of the AIs, or is it that the AIs then are being biased? It's like they're learning it's the teach to the test method, right?
Yeah.
To pass, like AIs could then pass this test, but maybe not others.
I also think there is a literacy at work that benefited ELIZA. I think if you do this same test with people in 1969, that ELIZA does much better. If you do this test in 1985, ELIZA will probably do worse. And I think as time goes on, GPT-4 will do worse because we'll all as a species start to learn what those little hallmarks are that says, oh, that's probably an AI. AIs do that a lot, but we don't all know that yet.
Right. We haven't figured out all of the various, one thing is there are programs that are out there. There are programs that are looking for the, basically the watermarks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The watermarks in the AI. So there is a predator-prey kind of evolution happening, which I think is fascinating.
That our brains are really good at is pattern recognition.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you have people in a study, let's say you did the same study, but you did it with people who have used ChatGPT, the paid for version, GPT-4, for 8 hours a day for a year, which is not possible because GPT-4 wasn't out a year ago, but you know what I'm saying.
Versus people who never have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to see these rates drop because those people are they're used to it. They're like, oh yeah, I see that a lot. The same way that Photoshop was way, way more convincing when it was new and even less capable than it is now when we're like, oh, that's probably Photoshop. I can kind of tell.
It's still impossible to figure out how to use, but
that's true. Can a human or a large language model use Photoshop? That will be the real test.
That's gonna be the one. That's gonna take us places. Oh my gosh. Okay, I think we've hit all of the stories for the first part of our show here. I do want to reintroduce you right now. Oh my goodness, everyone, this is Tom Merritt. Do you know? We've gone through a bunch of fun stories. Tom it's just always wonderful treat to get to talk to you, Tom. And it has been quite a while. I think we actually last emailed or talked, probably it's like last year.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's been a while. But anyway, you're a technology reporter. You've got a large number of podcasts that you do, and I don't understand how you do it.
Me either.
The Daily Tech News Show is the daily tech news show that you do, or It's a Thing with Molly Wood. You also write science fiction. We're on book number 4 now or something like that. Vera, is that what it's something?
Yeah. Trigger. Trigger was the more recent publication from Inkshares, and then Project Vera is an audiobook that you can get.
Oh, the audiobook, right? And then you also discuss fantasy and science fiction on Sword and Laser with Veronica Belmont. You're always posting on social media about the food that you're eating or your dogs. But can you let us know what have I missed here? What am I missing in your life?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, first of all, let me just say it's as much or more of a pleasure for me to get to chat with you on the show as well. So I am very grateful that you invited me on. This is a lot of fun for me. And it's because I deal with the technology side of things, but we don't get a lot of dolphin stories on Daily Tech News Show. So
really?
It's nice. It's nice to cross the waters, literally in that sense. I do Daily Tech News Show. The point of Daily Tech News Show is to help you understand technology. So we are not in the business of hyping up technology. We're not in the business of tearing down all the evils of technology. What we're trying to do is help each other understand, what does this do for us? You know, like we were talking earlier, like not being too optimistic, but not being too pessimistic. How can we actually be realistic about this stuff and make good use of it? That's for free, 30 minutes a day. If you're a patron of our show, you get a longer version. You get an hour a day. And then I also do a Substack now. That would be the new thing that you probably might not have known about at freetechnewsletter.com. And that's more of a lineup of what I think about stories. Daily Tech News Show is a lot of different people sharing perspectives, and I share my perspective on there, but there's a lot of like triangulation of our different perspectives. The Substack newsletter is really just me saying, okay, let me explain this story, why I think it's happening, and here's my opinion on it.
Again, you have how many hours do you have in the day? You must get up at 3 a.m. and go to bed at 2 a.m.
No, I go to bed early because I'm exhausted from doing all of it.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to be able to get your ideas out. How often do you take the ideas from the tech that you're regularly reporting on and thinking about with your own perspective, and then also mixing it up, little cocktail with other people's, and then how often does that bleed into your creative thinking and the fiction writing that you've done?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely crosses over, because a lot of what I'm doing for Daily Tech News Show is trying to understand, well, why did Twitch leave Korea? Instead of, that was a story that we did this week, where Twitch is pulling out of Korea because of high network transit costs. And so I didn't want to just be like, well, that's bad. And, it's bad for esports. I wanted to be like, well, why are they doing that? Like that doesn't seem like a right idea. So I dug into how this new policy in Korea, they're the only country that does this, was put in place in 2016. What are some of the motivations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now, because of that, if I'm ever writing a scene in Seoul, I'll have all of this knowledge that I can unpack and be like, well, let me like put in a problem with the bandwidth that is because of this, sender payment plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, machine learning and things like that obviously inform what I do. In some ways, it can be a danger, though. Like I wrote a character that is a machine intelligence that I now feel like it might already be dated and not very impressive compared to what we've had in the last year.
I think that's one of when you're working in science fiction, especially, it's like, okay, how fast is the science advancing to the point, and how realistic, how far in advance are you creating this character or this world that you're building, and how rapidly will it end up there?
Yeah, because one of the tricks that Cory Doctorow talks about using that I've learned from is extrapolate what's now to its logical conclusion, and then make that the future. And it's a near-term future, and you won't be far wrong. But the other thing that I do is just don't name things. So I will often, if I have somebody on a spaceship, just talk about screens. Like they picked up a screen, they looked at a screen, because as soon as I say, they picked up a device and described the device, I know that in 5 years, somebody's going to come up with some technology that's going to make that device look really silly.
Right. So, the specialized Zener blopper, blipper blopper.
Yeah. Occasionally keeping it vague and like, well, screen's probably a bad one too, though. Like maybe everything's just going to be floating holograms that are projected into our brains in the future. So who knows?
It all depends on the story. It depends on the consistency of what you're trying to create. And I mean, I love the interplay between science leading to technology as an application, but then also the extension of all of that into science fiction, which is, the creativity, which then can lead to new scientific studies and ideas. And the whole cycle builds on itself in a certain way.
Yeah. I just am publishing right now in newsletter form a story that is set in both the current time and the future. And in the future, they solved the climate crisis with a form of energy that causes the fundamental constant of physics to fluctuate and eliminate people randomly.
And there's the story this week. Unification of standard and quantum physics. There you go. I already wrote about it.
I pulled on like what do startups do, and like why, how do they get funded, and when do they pivot, and like I used all of that technology stuff in there. But also was kind of taking that model of side effects and innovation and what makes something popular that we know about technologies now, and worked it into the story.
So thinking about things that you have been thinking about recently this year, there's been a lot of progress in AI, right? So we just talked about the GPT-4, GPT-3, ELIZA,
the Turing test.
The Turing test. There's also some work with researchers creating AI. I say AI, but it's machine learning algorithms that can predict molecular structures, so chemicals that we don't know how to synthesize or haven't discovered yet, and then putting them into a robotics lab that can then do the experiments. And there are hundreds of thousands. They've already got hundreds of thousands of enzymes and proteins that they've got robots doing experiments on little chips with. And I mean, where are the people here?
This is one that I really think about a lot because, well, first of all, like you said, AI I think we're getting into a comfortable world where we think of AI as a collection of things, and I'm starting to be okay using it again. But for a long time, I tried to avoid using AI because people were using it as like magic thing that we don't understand and does amazing stuff. So you'll still hear me say large language model, machine learning, deep learning, neural network as much as possible, because those are different things. And I think it's important to not be afraid of this stuff, to understand what those are, what they can and can't do, and how they interoperate. And this is a great story. This story is a really good example of where I think it isn't quite as daunting as it might look at first. I wrote this in my newsletter earlier this week, but the one thing that hits me about all these tools is they're all trained on our knowledge. And of course, everybody talks about how that brings in our biases, but it also brings in our limits. So they can't create new knowledge. And this is a story where you might look at it and go, well, hell, hold on. They're finding all these things that we've never found. To which I would say that yes, but they're doing what we could if we had time. Right? They're just plowing through and making associations. And
they're doing the busy work for us.
Right. They didn't come up with a new theory of cosmology. They didn't create new concepts. And that's what I'm keeping an eye out for, is like, if I start seeing these things coming up with concepts and not just mimicking, they're very good at making it feel like they came up with a concept. Yeah. But when you dig into it, you're like, oh, well, they came up with that concept because that concept comes from this other author, right? That's why they're so impressive, is they can be all of our knowledge at once. And none of us can. None of us can have all of the knowledge at once, but they can't add to it. And so to me, that's just a super tool that's very good at things like this, but not something that I'm yet worried is going to take over or start acting on its own volition, which is that big upwingers and downwingers conversation about whether we should like only start to use these tools when we're sure they're safe, or use them knowing there's a limit to them and then adapt when we find out that they do harm.
I think of machine learning algorithms, all of this, as, it's tools at this point in time. I find in interactions with individuals online, especially in the scientific community at this point in time, there are many, many people who are entirely against using any of these AI tools to help with writing, because there is such a problem with the hallucinations, right, within AI. So the fact that it's the machine learning algorithms and the informational networks that they're using are probability based, right? So how often is the probability of this word in this context used together, and it puts the ideas together and can sometimes make the things up, right? And there's this, speaking about the knowledge creation, which scientists, that's the job of scientists. There's this fascinating backlash by individuals saying, I think anyone who's using any AI to help with any aspect of their writing isn't doing the job of a scientist. And there's a part of me that sees what they're saying, but at the same time, I feel like there's room for there's too much emotional backlash there.
I mean, that becomes a problem when it's like, okay, but which tool is the AI you don't like? Spell check, okay, yeah, everybody's fine with spell check. Okay, cool. What about like auto completing the sentence in email? Is that one all right? Oh, okay, so maybe you're okay with that, maybe you're not. To me,
where does the line get crossed?
I think there's really, really good limits being placed. I was just at a conference about content management systems for newsrooms, and they are very sensibly saying, we would like to bring these tools to reporters to help them write, but the reporter is still on the hook for what goes in the story. So we've seen all these bad stories about a publication that uses these auto-generated stories without anybody looking at them. That's exactly the wrong way to use them. The right way to use them is as an assistant, as a tool where you say, hey, can you summarize this, this set of data for me? And then you look at that summarization and you say, okay, does that check? Does that look right? And the argument against that is, well, if that's not more efficient than doing it myself, and if that's the case, then don't use it. But there will be cases where it will be more efficient.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you there. Well, I mean, it's yet to be seen where it's going to be used and where it will be misused. It's already being misused in content farming and the creation of fake research papers in the scientific area. It's across the web everywhere. It's kind of like, chumming the SEO waters with content, right? Just put a lot of stuff out there and people will, it'll send people to your site eventually, maybe.
It's tempting and comforting to say, there's so many bad uses for this, just don't use it at all. And then that'll stop the bad uses. I get that argument. But I do think once the smoke clears, we will see, like everything else, like there are people who eschewed computers and were like, I would never write on a computer. The typewriter allows me to think about what I'm writing, and a computer is a horrible way to write. And that's just not a very common way to think anymore, because people have grown up writing on computers, and we've learned like, these are their pitfalls, and we now know how to avoid them.
I love the difference between the way I think and the way my son thinks. He's grown up on computers, and he has never liked writing with a pen, pencil on paper. Never enjoyed that process. But get him a keyboard, and he is magic. His ideas come out. He gets everything out. I'm the opposite. I have to get my ideas out on paper because that's what I learned. And so it's so fascinating that the tools that we use are also enabling our thought processes and how we think. And so I think that's also going to be an interesting question moving forward as we adapt AI as our tool to help us with our thinking moving forward.
I mean, my grandparents one of my grandparents, my grandpa chided me for using a typewriter.
Really?
Yeah. He's like, it's lazy, hand write. It's good for you.
Work on your legibility, son.
You'll need this, typewriters won't always be around. You'll need to know how to write. You'll need to know cursive. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now cursive is going to be one of those like preserved
Yeah,
forms
like
of communication. Kids oh my gosh, I just did that. Kids these days can't read cursive. And it's shocking.
Yeah, it's antiquated already.
It's shocking, I tell you.
I have a thing where I actually compose best with a keyboard because I grew up using like the TI-99 and a typewriter.
Got it.
I have a hard time composing on a phone with a touchscreen. Like it just doesn't feel right?
No. Yeah.
But I know people who use their phone to do everything.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing.
I can't do touch screens, and I'm just like, this is why it's part of the reason why I'm not an Apple iPhone user. I'm like, it's just too much touching the screen. I can't do it.
Well, Android's the same way.
How do I do that? But at least Android has like pretend buttons now. I mean, come on. It's got some buttons. I like them.
It's got a few. Not as many as it used to.
I know. One of these days,
your buttons are going away.
What am I going to do? I'm going to sit down and write you a letter?
Yeah,
on
you
paper?
Need those haptics.
Oh, okay. So thinking about the future, I mean, we could talk about quantum stuff, or we could move on into talking about the history. You said you had a show that you did recently. You're doing your Know a Little More podcast. You've always been interested in history. I know you've always done, like, there was always like a bit of history podcasting always in there, and I love this. So tell me about this mother of all demos.
Yeah. So Know a Little More is a show I started because I was doing this anyway, where I would be like, you know what? I just really need to understand ARM, the processor instruction set. And I would dig in and I would make notes and I would learn all about it. And I was like, well, let's just turn this into a show. So I started doing it as a show. And then a year ago, I hooked up with Justin Robert Young at Dog and Pony Show Audio. And he's like, let me take that show you're doing and all that good research and make it sound prettier. And so we started working on the construction of the show and the storytelling elements. And we did a season last year that was pretty good, but this year we themed the season of the show around something called the Mother of All Demos. Have you heard of the Mother of All Demos before?
No. So this is all new to me and I'm excited.
Okay.
So
in 1968 in San Francisco, Douglas Engelbart, who is generally, if you have heard of him, you've heard of him credited as the inventor of the mouse, which is a very good argument that he is the inventor of the mouse. He did a demo on stage at a computer conference where he not only showed off the mouse, he showed off word processing, collaborative editing, video conferencing, pretty much everything you do with your current computer, the cut and paste, insert editing, everything.
So this was like around the same time as Steve Jobs was first getting up and talking about like his new Macintosh computer.
No, this is 20 years
no.
before that. Steve Jobs is very tiny at this point. I'm sure he's alive,
Amazing.
but yeah, we haven't landed on the moon yet. So you can't say we can put a man on the moon, but you can't build a mouse, because it's the opposite when he's giving this demo. So the season of Know a Little More starts with talking about the Mother of All Demos, how it came about, how Douglas Engelbart was able to create this lab at Stanford to make all these experiments, how people reacted to the demo by saying, wow, that's really great. We could never do that, and just let it all languish. Eventually, a lot of his ideas make their way over to Xerox PARC up the street in Palo Alto.
There it goes.
And of course, then that's where they are developed farther. And Steve Jobs and Bill Gates both stop by and borrow a bunch of ideas and bring them into the Mac and Windows later on. But yeah, we have an episode on the Mother of All Demos, have an episode on word processing, episode on video conferencing, episode on the mouse, all of that, a few others in there as well. And we finish with kind of a forward-looking one called Aloha Net, where I talk about how one of the few things to happen in that time period that didn't come out of the Mother of All Demos was Ethernet. And it came out of people in Hawaii trying to figure out how to timeshare computers across the islands on the University of Hawaii system. And that led to the protocol that underlies both Ethernet and Wi-Fi, actually. So that's the final episode of that season. But DNS, the domain name system, came out of Engelbart's lab. Collaborative editing was probably the last of the spin-offs to kind of make it into mainstream use. But we wouldn't have Google Docs if it hadn't been able to build on what Engelbart's team put together. So that's the story, and it's really a fascinating story. In writing it, I kept discovering more connections. Like I was just updating my domain name system episode, and I found the connection to Engelbart, and I was like, well, we have to include this in the season now.
But the thing just is the most surprising, and I guess not surprising, is how he was ahead of his time. And there is always this idea in technology that there are things that come ahead of their time, and then they languish for just a little while until the resources or the technology become available, or I guess it's in the design world, it's putting a solution ahead of the problem. So it's basically Engelbart was like, look, we're going to want to do all these things. But people were like, I don't want to do these things yet. I'm fine. I don't need that. Why do I need that? So
yeah. The attitude was sort of like, oh, sure, because hypertext, I didn't even mention hypertext was one of the things he showed off in 1968, clicking on a link. And people were like, yeah, that looks great in your demo. But I really need to figure out, how to do my local timeshare allocation. Like, people were so practical with their immediate problems that they couldn't see how this would help them. And I still see that attitude all the time. Whenever there's a new technology, there's a strain of people who just want to tear it down and go, well, what is that good for? And sometimes they're right, because, stop clocks right twice a day, right? But a lot of times it's just that it's ahead of its time, like you say, where like it's new. We haven't quite figured out where exactly it fits. Of course, it's not going to be obvious yet because it hasn't been implemented before now.
That's why it's, I don't know. I think that's the fun part of also the science and tech kind of, there's always been a bit of tension between the two, because science is always like, well, we're going to work on this no matter what. We got basic science. We're going to figure out how to do these things, and we just want to know why they work. And then there's the applied science, which is how do you take the science that has been figured out and actually put it to use? And then there's okay, now we've got the applied science. We've got some ideas here. How are we going to actually get that into use cases in the market? And how do we get people to want these things? And now I feel like we're just like in this, I don't know, hamster wheel of startup VC unicorn app death. I don't know.
I don't think that's new. I think our awareness of it is new. And I think that's what a lot of people feel like, oh, this is the worst technology has ever been, because we are aware of all of the problems. And that's a good thing. Sunlight is a good thing because it allows us to see the problems, but it's demoralizing, right? To see them all the time. So we kind of have to get used to that.
That's awesome. I hadn't thought about it that way. This is why I like to talk to you. You bring a different view that I can then incorporate and think about for a little while, and maybe I'll start my own Substack. What I think about Tom's Substack. .com.
Just rip me apart. Here's what you got wrong, Merritt.
Here's what I think, man. Oh my goodness. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up in this segment while we're talking about things you're doing
you mentioned
and other
real
stuff?
Quickly, the quantum stuff. The only thing I'll add to that is that you may think quantum computing is kind of moribund. There have been very slow, sort of not very headline grabbing progress, but they're the kind of progress that are making it more useful. And a lot of the folks that I follow who follow that industry say that next year we are going to see a lot of practical uses for quantum computing. They're probably going to be enterprise level stuff. They're not going to be things that you can take advantage of directly. They're going to be very academic, research oriented kinds of stuff in a lot of cases. But it looks like probably in the next year, maybe 2025, but probably in 2024, we're going to start seeing quantum computing show up as something that is being used for real things.
You're not going to have quantum computing in your phone, though.
Probably not. No. Not for a while.
So, like you said, enterprise level. So it'll be quantum computing, and when we talk about applications for quantum computing, it's calculating.
Yeah. It's
right?
Climate modeling or projecting, things like that. A lot of modeling kind of stuff. Different kind of modeling than the AI modeling we're talking about. But yeah, very, very specific things.
I do wonder what the two would be like put together. Machine learning at the super fast quantum speed. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think quantum computing is good at the kinds of processing that they're using now, but that doesn't mean they won't figure out a way to take advantage of it, right?
Right. I don't know. All I'm hoping is that maybe one day Portland will have accurate weather forecasts. That would be very nice. I would like that.
Weather forecasting is a good one. Yeah, quantum computing can help a lot with that. Weather forecasting is actually better than it's ever been. It's just still not always great and still not always right. So that's another recent study that came out where they used machine learning to put a whole bunch of basic climate weather forecasting models together, and it came out more accurate than all of them. Yeah, on the large level,
On the
not
large.
sadly on the Portland neighborhood level yet,
I
but you know,
know.
slowly getting there.
We'll get there eventually. Oh, our quantum future. Okay, so if you were to be on our prediction show for this next year, you'd say quantum computing is gonna.
Yeah, keep
hit
an eye on that. That might end up in
2020.
my DTNS prediction show actually too.
Put a little pin in that one. We'll just stick that one right there. This is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us. If you just tuned in, I need to let you know that this show is listener supported. And if you are looking for your 2024 calendar, please head over to twis.org, click on the Zazzle link, and get yourself a TWIS calendar. I did send out links through our newsletter. I sent a newsletter, everybody. Isn't that exciting? Da, da, da. But yes, on Zazzle, we have our 2024 calendars available that Blair, during her maternity leave, has so wonderfully done the art for and put together. And so you can get those as gifts for people for the holiday season, for yourself. While you're there, buy other gifts for people. There's mugs, there's lumbar pillows, there's blankets. I have a really awesome beach towel that I got, like if you're planning for your, winter, summer vacation, the TWIS beach towel, I highly recommend. But anyway, all the gifts, a portion of the proceeds go to support TWIS. Additionally, we are Patreon supported. So if you would like to help in a continuing manner to help the show keep going, head over to twis.org and click on the Patreon link. If you donate at a level of $10 or more per month, we will thank you by name at the end of the show. $15 or more a month, and you get a sticker every quarter. And I'm going to change up the stickers pretty soon. So this next year, you're going to be getting some new stickers. If you hadn't gotten just stickers, it'll be great. There's also T-shirt levels, all sorts of fun things in there. But really, all of you, if there's anything that you can do for TWIS, it's share TWIS for the holidays. Get people to subscribe, tell those you love that this is a show you love, and get other people to listen. That would really help out a lot. We can't do any of this without you. Thank you for your support. All right, Tom, I have a few more stories.
Put that ketamine in my brain.
I would like to, but I don't know if you would like the effects.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
By talking about it, not by putting it in my brain.
Yeah, so ketamine has been looked at as a possible treatment for treatment-resistant depression. It's also good for not pain killing, but disassociation. It's often used in anesthesia and in veterinary medicine as an anesthetic. Part of the question with research previously is, how does it work in the brain? What is it doing? What is happening in there? And so this group of researchers just published in their Cell Reports paper their whole brain mapping of the divergent impacts of ketamine on the brain. Previous studies have only looked at particular areas, basically hypotheses that were like, well, we think ketamine will impact this area of the brain this way because this is an effect that ketamine has when people take it. So this group went in kind of without that hypothesis. And so they said, what's happening all over the brain? So they washed mouse brains in ketamine. And I'm
Didn't it say not to do that on the little tag that came with the mouse brain?
Do not wash in
dry,
ketamine.
Dry clean only. Do not wash in ketamine.
Anyway, they found that repeated exposure of ketamine leads to a decrease in dopamine neurons in regions that are important for regulating mood. There was an increase in neurons in the hypothalamus, which was related to homeostasis and metabolism. So it's very interesting. They think that the changes in dopamine in the midbrain, mood-related reasons, it could be related to why some ketamine users and abusers find symptoms similar to schizophrenia over time.
That makes sense.
It does, but there are really good health and therapeutic impacts of ketamine as well. So now the question is, how can we really tune in on the dosage, the timing, the length of time, the duration, the frequency of ketamine treatments to help various things like eating disorders, mood disorders, other aspects where it is potentially therapeutically helpful.
How do we get it to the right part of the brain?
That's
So
exactly.
It's not,
Yeah, that's the exact
Anthrobots?
question. Right? We need the Anthrobots. Send them to the brain. But one part of this study that it kind of perked my skeptic brain was that the researchers, their repeated exposure to the drug was at doses that are higher than I think most people recreationally would be taking ketamine.
You mean
So
the
researchers-
mouse, the exposures to the mouse?
to the
supposed
mice,
to-
yeah. So
yeah.
the amount of copamine, that's my new word, ketamine. It was analogous to the dose used during a model depression treatment, and then another was closer to the dose that induces anesthesia, and they did this on a repeated daily exposure for up to 10 days.
Yeah, that's not a normal amount.
Right. And even in therapeutic dosages, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it's not like
I mean,
you're
there's an
going in
argument to be
daily
made
for
that
10 days and having these massive quantities.
you're doing it in order to make sure that you see the effect, and then you could do another study at normal levels to see how it differed.
Yeah.
But you would need another study for sure. Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is more study is necessary. The big picture here is that they start with the big doses, right? They see that there is alteration of the dopaminergic system, alteration of the neurons and the way they connect to each other, the way that they increase or decrease their release of dopamine. And that in itself on a brain-wide level is something that needs to be looked at. And like you said, to help us figure out targeting in the future.
Yeah. All right.
I really like this study also because it has very, very pretty pictures of mouse brains.
I bet these mice have framed these.
They're so pretty. I like them.
Mom, look, it's my brain.
Look, it's my brain on drugs.
Literally.
Literally on drugs. Okay. But what does it mean to be doing this to mice and looking at their brains and everything? Another study just published this week in Neuron showed that mice display self-recognition behavior during the mirror test. Tom, are you familiar with the mirror test?
I've heard of the mirror test.
When you look into a mirror, do you see a stray hair or one of those odd gray ones that grows out of your eyebrow or something and go, oh God, and pull it out because you realize it's on your own face as opposed to somebody else's?
Yes. I rarely look in the mirror and start laughing. That guy's eyebrows are all messed up. Yeah. I usually am aware of that.
Usually. Yeah. So the interesting aspect of this is that we've looked at a number of different animals that we're like, of course they have self-identity. They can recognize themselves, of course.
I know Blair is listening right now and saying the usual Blair line of like, yes, of course.
Of course. Yes. But in this study, they determined that it's fascinating with mice specifically that if they haven't been trained how a mirror works, if they're not familiar with mirrors, they don't look at themselves in them and it's not a big thing. And also if they're not socialized to be around other mice and to know themselves from other mice. And
so they have to be trained what a mirror is, like, hey, that's you. And they have to understand what you is, right?
Yes.
That's interesting.
But they wouldn't know, and according to their results, mice don't necessarily know who they are if they are raised alone. they don't have they don't learn a concept of self from other if they are raised in isolation, which is a very sad thing to think about, but it's really also very very telling and interesting in terms of thinking about lots of different species and how we look at socialization versus isolation. And
there is no me without you.
Yes, Tom, tonight. It's true. Yeah, so there's
for a mouse, that's true.
For the mice, it's very true. And in this case, they had to use very big dollops of black ink or white ink, and they had to be kind of like a paint that the mice felt in their fur.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mice would look at it and try and get it out when they looked in the mirrors. But little tiny dots didn't bother the mice as much as bigger dots. Less tactile dots didn't bother them as much either. You know, that could also just be, you know, they don't care about how they look, you know, as much as.
Yeah, the next study needs to look at, like, you know, but what is their self-opinion? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. How do they think of themselves?
Yeah, so they found a set of neurons, a subset in the ventral hippocampus, a very specific region of the hippocampus where they got activated when the mice recognized themselves in the mirror. And it was this group of neurons that they could then make non-functional, and they could make it so the mice no longer cared whether they had ink on their foreheads and didn't do self-grooming.
Yeah, because they don't even recognize themselves.
Nope, neurons turned off, mice don't care. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting moving forward. They have this mouse model. They can manipulate the neurons. They can now look and see how this circuit works. Mice are actually very, very close to humans on the phylogenetic evolutionary scale. So in terms of mice, we're doing a great job of figuring it out. Maybe it'll help us understand more about how neuronal circuits for sociality, self-recognition, isolation, loneliness, other aspects are developed in humans as well. But who knows? Right now, we just know how we can get a mouse to look at themselves in a mirror.
Yeah. And I guess if they don't have a sense of self, they wouldn't feel lonely.
Right. I don't need anyone else. I don't know
because
anyone else.
You don't know what anyone else means at that point.
I just know myself.
Mouse, know thyself.
Do I even know myself? Oh, geez.
Mouse-self.
No. Oh my gosh! Now I'm going to put a myself on the shelf for Christmas.
That's a gratifying thought.
So gratifying that I want to talk about some birds that like to delay their gratification, published in PLOS One, which is an open journal where you can read the research yourself if you want to. Researchers from Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge, UK, and the University of Cambridge compared the behavior of Eurasian jays and New Caledonian crows. Jays are like, I don't know if you know, scrub jays or
blue jays.
Gray jays, blue jays. They store food. They do all sorts of things. They're very social, maybe a little bit more aggressive than the crows. The crows are also incredibly social, but they have a different social structure. And there are questions about the levels of cognition and intelligence, and also, you know, where they can, what decisions they make and why. And in this particular study, they showed that, yes, both the jays and the New Caledonian crows are able to delay gratification for their favorite food. They can do that. But the jays are more likely to eat stale bread or whatever is given to them, like the first food thing, and not wait for their favorite food thing if there are other jays around.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas the crows, they're going to wait it out. But I mean, their favorite food is meat. So they're like, I'm going to wait for that nice little rare steak you're going to give me there. So
the jays are the personalities of, like, if you're going to try to take that, I'm going to take it first. Like, I don't want you to, I don't want to miss out. I better take it. Where the crows are like, go ahead. I bet something better is coming and you'll regret it.
I can wait.
I can do this all day.
You go to the salad bar.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait until the barbecue's over.
Yep. I'm gonna wait for that surf and turf to come out.
Yeah, and it it has been shown in their different cultural habits that the New Caledonian crows are also, they're maybe more able to cooperate with other crows for tool use, for developing, for finding food, for even hunting and managing their families. So, yeah.
I have an understanding with the crows in my neighborhood that I do not have with the jays. I don't know if that really ties into this, but like seriously, like I can walk. My dog used to like jump and bark at the crows, and I would stop it, and then I would look at the crows, and I would apologize. And the crows like stopped flying away when I came. They're like, "Oh yeah, he's got the dog.
Cool.
He's cool."
But the jays are like,
the jays were just always like, "Screech, screech, get away!" No matter what I did.
That sounds like jays.
Yeah,
it really does.
It's just who they are.
That's who the jays are. It does. And, Tom, as we're getting to the end of our show right here, I want to talk a little bit about sleep and how important maybe napping could be during your day. Some people nap, like we've talked about. Some people not sleeping full nights. They get up a little bit, have a second sleep in the nighttime, or maybe you take a 20-minute nap during the day to regain a little bit of energy. Do you nap at all?
I love to nap. I don't always get a chance to nap. And I have noticed when I don't nap, I will often go to sleep and then wake up after an hour or two and then go back to sleep. Whereas if I've napped, I sleep all the way through the night.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
What's your napping restores you and makes you more tired?
it's like my body's like, no, you're going to take a nap. We'll just take it now and then wake you back up or something. I don't know. It's interesting. I always feel better when I get a good nap.
I have never been able to nap.
No.
People nap, little naps. I am a sleeper. I will if I lie down for a nap, I'm out for like 3 hours.
I have to limit my nap. If my nap goes past 40 minutes, I'm in trouble. Like that will mess me up. But 20 minutes is ideal. Like a 20-minute nap, that's good.
How about 4 seconds?
That would probably it doesn't do anything.
So a new study in Science, the authors studied chinstrap penguins, Pagocellus antarcticus, and they are estimated in nearly 8 million breeding pairs on the Antarctic Peninsula and South Atlantic Ocean islands. So they have to stay awake to watch their eggs, to watch their young babies during their breeding season, because the skuas, if anybody has watched, Happy Feet? Or there's some of those penguin movies where the skua comes and like the skua is the bad guy. It's gonna skua's gonna eat your baby if you're a penguin. So they have to watch out for the skuas and their partners. There's often one parent left at home to watch over the egg, guard them, and the partner goes out to forage. It'll be gone for days and days and days. And could you do that? Stay awake? Like, you're like, I have to stay awake to
gotta sleep sometime.
Right. So they implanted electrodes in 14 birds in a colony and recorded the electrical activity in their
the penguins.
I know. This time they were not stimulating; they were recording the brain and neck muscles, and they used accelerometers and GPS to figure out where the penguins were,
how much
they
RAM
were moving.
Were in these penguins. What was the PPI on their displays? You might be able to sell these.
I know. So they found that these penguins would fall asleep more than 10,000 times a day, but only sleep for about 4 seconds, less than 4 seconds each time they fell asleep.
10,000 4-second naps a day sounds like insanity to me.
It's 11 hours of sleep, I guess.
Yeah, but none at a go, right?
None None continuously. Like the whole idea of
Wow.
REM sleep and deep sleep that we as like mammals think like it is circadian rhythms that are supposed to be like we have to get into, our 90 minutes of sleep for you guys. You have REM sleep and then deep sleep, and you have to have a whole cycle or else you're not going to be refreshed, blah, blah, blah. These penguins are not doing this at all. at all.
They packetized sleep.
I did. Yeah. So penguins, apparently, if they are on the outside of the colony, they got longer, deeper bouts of sleep than the ones getting bumped around who are in the center of the colony.
Okay.
But the ones in the center of a colony are also at greater risk of another penguin stealing their nesting materials. So there's safety in numbers from the skuas, but also nest theft from other penguins and weird things going on. But from all of this, the researchers know nothing about how restorative that sleep was to those penguins.
How can you count it as sleep when it's only 4 seconds? Like, that's just, that is so fascinating to me.
Quantized sleep.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is. But yeah, it's totally abnormal. But it's normal in these penguins. And so who knows? Maybe we too can get through the day nodding off.
Just so you know,
seconds.
I napped 200 times during this conversation.
Damn it, Tom.
You never do, though.
I never noticed.
4 seconds at a time.
It's totally fine. We got through it. It's fine. And on that note, we've finished the stories for today. And I hope that this last story didn't make everyone nod off to a 4-second nap, but might get you ready for a full night of sleep or whatever day is ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. All right. Everyone out there, thank you for listening so much. I hope you all enjoyed the show. Tom, thank you for joining us. This was amazing. I really enjoyed it. Where can people find you?
Oh, thank you, Kiki. I love being here, as I said, and I will keep saying millions of times. It's one of my favorite shows. I've been listening to it forever. So it's an honor to be invited back on it. If you would like to find other things that I do, head to dailytechnewsshow.com. That's the main thing that I do, if you only remember one thing. Or you can look at all the stuff I do at tommerritt.com.
Those sound like reasonable places to send people.
I hope so.
And for everyone out there, I'd like to also say thank you to the people who do help with the show. Fada, thank you for your help on show notes and social media. Gord, thank you. And Aaron Lore, thank you for manning the chat room and keeping it a happy place to be. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you for your editing. And I do, as always, need to thank our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Trent Northcote, Rick Loveman, George Corris, Pierre Velazar, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Chris Wozniak, Vegard Shefstad, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Style, Ali Coffin, Reagan Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundis, P.I.G., Stephen Albaran, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollack, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Jimmy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul Rick Ramus, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Dizzy, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. We really cannot do it without you. And if you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, head over to twist.org and click on the Patreon link. On next week's show, we're going to be joined by Trace Dominguez. And I've also heard hints of a Justin sighting. We will see. Don't miss it.
They will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from their YouTube and Facebook channels and from twist.org/live.
And if you want to listen to us as a podcast, search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe too.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on the website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for that newsletter that sent out an issue. Yay!
What? You can contact us directly. I'm Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com. Justin is twistminion@gmail.com. Blair is blairbaz at twist.org. And, Tom, I'm going to let you do this one. Make sure to put twist in the subject line. So
your email doesn't get bathed in ketamine and washed out to sea to be observed by a napping penguin.
Which means not observed at all. Oh,
you can also ping us on Twitter, TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, at Blair's Menagerie. I'm at Ace Detect. Good luck spelling it. We love your feedback. If there is a topic you would like us to cover or address or a suggestion for an interview, please let them know.
We will be back here again next week, like we said, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations.
And we fade out into the after show. Thank you so much, Tom. Woo!
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was so much fun.
Thank you. I know I've kept you up late. So
you think Dr. Kiki's kidding, but I told her before the show, she's like, how long can you go? I'm like, as long as I'm awake, because I do tend to go to bed early, but I'm doing good. I'm doing fine. I took a lot of 4-second penguin naps. It's totally working for me.
I mean, that's what I'm going to be, from now on in meetings. Kiki, why are you blinking so long?
Just take a penguin nap.
Penguin nap,
That's great.
Just the whole thing. It keeps me more alert in the long run. It's great.
Yeah. What, you don't know about penguin naps?
It's a whole learning thing now. It's like now we can teach everyone about the importance of penguin naps.
Yes, public service announcements.
I mean, it's penguins, so of course it's applicable to people. I mean, that's what we always do with animals.
Aren't we
in science.
70% penguin? This is where I don't have to be accurate anymore, right? I could just say whatever comes into mind.
Or we could be a potato. Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
80% related to a potato.
I mean, we have DNA. Anything else that has DNA is going to be pretty similar to us. So.
Yes. Oh, and speaking of DNA, I have a book story idea that I'm working on, Tom.
Oh, yeah?
I do. And it's a little near future science fiction-y, dystopian kind of thing.
I love it.
And I've only gotten a little bit into it, but I'm trying to like work out the things. I'm trying to, do the Cory Doctorow thing and extrapolate in a thoughtful manner. And I'm reaching out to other scientists who work in genomics and phylogenetics and other things and trying to, get my science down.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing I think is the characters, right? because if you don't have characters that people like, who cares?
They need to be different, right? They can't all be the same character.
And Bob said to Bob,
yeah.
yes.
And they should not all be you. That was another thing I learned along the way. So you've got to create characters, and then they have to do interesting things in service of the story you're trying to tell.
Plot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know about the 4 doorways into a story?
No. See, I scienced forever. And I told myself I was the world's worst writer for a very long time, but had lots of ideas. And then I've recently, in the last couple of years, allowed myself to do more than just journalistic writing. And I'm exploring bad poetry, mediocre poetry, and now, some other creative ideas like this one.
Yeah.
And, I think it's like a young adult type science fiction thing, but anyway, no, I do not know the 4 doorways.
They're really more for readers, but I find them helpful as a writer too. Nancy Pearl, a librarian, kind of crystallized these thoughts that have been kicking around, and it's that people have different entry points into a story. And there are 4 doors that they go through. And this is why people disagree on whether a book is good or not, because you have a different doorway that you prefer. And the doors are story, character, setting, and language. And so some people are all about world building, and the setting is what's important. Some people are character, some people are plot, story, and some people are very style. Like literary fiction fans usually are very much about language. But this is helpful to me as a writer because I don't feel like I have to nail all 4 of those to have an enjoyable book. I have to pay attention to all of them, and none of them should be bad. But if I look at a story and I'm like, well, the world building's really good, then I'm like, oh, okay, this is for the people whose doorway is setting then. And as long as my characters and story are also good, my setting can be the star of the show.
Laura says, what if I just care about the cover art? Which door am I?
You're the front door. Also, Aaron Lore, I do support TWIS on Patreon. You just don't see it.
You do. I know you do. I know you do.
But Aaron Lore was calling me out in chat for not being in your list
Was
at the end of the show. Yeah.
No, I mean, you're being here. I mean, that's huge support in itself. And you're listening and talking like you've had me on your show. There's support.
Oh yeah, there's plenty to go around.
Sorts of support.
But so yes, character is important, and I'm not trying to say that any of these things aren't important, but if you've got a really good story, you can lean into that a little bit. Is why I brought up the 4 doorways thing.
I'm gonna check that out. Thank you. And I'm potentially, if you're into young adult kind of dystopian science fiction stuff, would you be interested in early chapters?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I would love to.
Awesome.
That would be thrilling. That would be fun.
I'd be like, look at the word crap I put out in the internet. I can say that now because it's the after show.
Sure. And whatever feedback or no feedback you would want, just let me know. But I love reading stories. I should probably send you some of my stuff too.
Yes, you did at one point, and I read it, but I wasn't able to get back to you in time for, like, you had like I need comments by this.
Oh yeah, that
I wasn't able to get comments back in time, but
the comments can come at any time.
Oh, okay.
I think that one I haven't actually still. I haven't actually published.
Really?
Was that the girl at the bottom of the lake?
No. Wait.
Oh, was it about like dimension rangers and? Mm-hmm. Was that any of that ringing a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah. I still haven't published that one. I still have that one sitting around. So it's not too late.
It's not too late. Okay. But yeah, now I'm like gonna look at your book.
Yeah, the
Yes,
girl.
no, it was Girl at the Bottom of the Lake. That's what it was called. Yes, that's the one.
I'm still trying to fix some stuff in the second half of that story. That's why that one's still sitting around.
Okay. Well, if you want to send me your latest, we can maybe, I don't know. I like reading.
Yeah. The moment is the one about the people who solve the climate crisis and then cause a worse crisis.
Oh no.
Which sounds, the story is not nearly as depressing as that makes it sound, but the premise is that they tap another dimension to bring in energy, but by doing that, they undermine the fundamental constant, and it causes variations in the laws of physics that will just get rid of people will just disappear. And so they figure out how to communicate back in time. You can't travel back in time, but you can send information.
Yes.
And so they contact, there's a whole explanation of why they pick this person, but they contact a person as a young child. And they say, we're going to be able to contact you 4 times. And they try to convince this person because they know that they'll be in the right place to do something to stop the problem from being created. And that's, the question is like, can you?
Right. What is the,
and that's the tension of the story is like, will they do it? And if they do it, could it actually
Is it
help?
going to cause a paradox, or is it actually going to just, by doing that, you just set the whole chain of events in motion that lead to the end event in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. That's the story.
I love the timey-wimey stuff. I really enjoyed watching Bodies. I think what was that on Netflix or?
Bodies. I don't think I ran into that one. Really? I'll have to look for that.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. It's all time-based, and it gets into, it's the same event kind of happening at multiple times, and there are detective characters throughout history over like 150-year period who all kind of come in contact with this dead body and this mystery. Right. And so they all have to try to solve, they're all working on solving the mystery. And then, but it all weaves together in the end in this very interesting time perspective that at the very, very end, they throw a wrench in it and you kind of go, oh, what is going to happen? Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
I love those concepts. And I'm even forgiving because I personally, this is a belief, not knowledge, believe that if time travel is possible in any way, that it can't change anything, right? That if I were to go back to 1968.
Are you a Marvel time traveler where it's like different timelines? Or it's like, if you do anything, it has to be parallel. It has it splinters time.
I think you probably don't even have that, is my guess. My guess is like, if I go back to 1968 and I do something, it won't change anything. Whatever I did already is affecting now. And that, there might be alternate universes and alternate timelines, but that's kind of a cheat. They probably all collapse into one timeline, really. And so I like the challenge of trying to think of a compelling time travel story that it seems like, well, that wouldn't be very interesting if you can't change anything. And it's like, no, it could still be interesting because you're a human and you're going to want to try and you're going to think you did it. But the world is time is way vaster than we think, right? Yeah. And so you might be like, well, I would know that it happened. Not necessarily. No. So many things happen that it's hard to tell. And history isn't always accurate. So you don't always know what actually happened, stuff like that. So I find that really fun.
Let's see. Gord McLeod in Twitch is saying, I think for me, I'm good with the story and character doors. I can be pretty forgiving of the story if the characters and world engage me enough, even more so the language.
Mm-hmm. those are your doors.
Those are your doors. And
Yeah.
then Arnlore says, what about when you go back and kill baby Hitler?
You can't. That's the thing, right? You may think you can, but every time you try, something will happen and get in your way. So it's just,
Or
you know,
there's, or it's, yeah,
if you,
that's what I wonder
if you
though.
could, it would have already happened.
Right. That is one of the paradox things, right? Is like if
Yeah.
these things were going to have happened, they would have already have happened. We
And
wouldn't
just
know.
like
We
I
wouldn't
almost
know.
think of it like electron valences. Like you just can't change it because it's gonna happen the way it happened. So whatever you think you're trying to do will just get pushed away and it won't happen.
Yes, think of it exactly like that.
It's really hard for an electron to get out of its orbit.
Oh,
It's really
it's
hard
so
for a
hard.
human to change time.
I don't know. All it takes is a good burst of photonic energy, and an electron get a boost up into
Then you get an
another
alternate universe and you're in Marvel land. Yeah.
anywhere. Yeah, there you go. Oh, it's so much fun. I love chatting about like the would it be, could it be, kind of knowing or understanding where we are right now. And
Yeah.
I always love the what ifs. Have you talked
I do
with-
love the what if stuff. Yeah.
Have you been on Philip Shane's podcast?
Yeah.
What If?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
It's
that
so
was fun. Love Philip. He's great.
He's fantastic. Yeah. He's one of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Very much.
Yeah. All right.
There's a lot of good ones.
There are a lot of good ones. You're a good one?
You're a good one. There's two.
I try to be a good one. I don't know if I am a good one. I try.
Yeah, I'll take your word for
I'm
it.
doing my best. I mean, when I'm off air, I'm like,
You just let it all go.
all the bad stuff.
Evil Kiki comes out.
Evil Kiki.
Fair Kiki's just like throwing straws out the front window and burning coal on her front lawn. And
You want to know what's in my fire? Yeah, I dug it up out of the earth. It's methane and coal.
just burning
fires
natural
me
gas
up?
for no reason.
Haha.
Oh
All
my
right.
gosh.
I have kept you up, and I have kept myself up. Off here, I sell homeopathic
Oh,
medicine.
that's the deepest cut.
Oh,
Ouch.
Lord, you just hurt me. that
Ooh, you
cut
wound.
me deeply.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, wow. Seriously.
Hates birds.
Oh, that's right. I lace my bird feeder with bird poison.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is alternate universe. The evil Kiki. One with has a goatee.
I don't ever want to go tea.
See, that's how we know you're not the evil Kiki.
I don't know. Maybe I should do that one Halloween. Just be evil Kiki for Halloween. Who are you? I'm evil me. It's
Oil is
just-
great. Homeopath. What would you like to try my homeopathic remedies?
I'm pessimistic about everything. End stage capitalism is the best.
Is the best.
I love it. Let's make more money off of your sorrows.
Oh my gosh.
Is Eileen still up?
Oh yeah, I can hear. I hear the bloops of YouTube
The bloops.
as she's on the Apple TV as you did like.
Bloop, bloop, bloop. What are you going to watch next? She's not watching this, obviously.
I don't think so. Although I don't know.
Daniel Smith says, evil Kiki is scaring me. Make it stop.
Make it stop.
Okay, we'll make it stop.
Yeah.
That's not what I do. It's funny for a second. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Not. It's
So
not
you
real.
got to draw the line.
I mean, we might bring it back next Halloween for Nightmare Juice, but other than
There you
that,
go. Yeah.
it's all good. Yeah.
Good.
Let's do more happy, optimistic, realistic things.
Yes, indeed. The real
Yes.
Kiki.
Yes, all of it. Are you going to CES again this year? Is that
I
in
am.
the
Yeah.
cards?
I think I just kind of settled on the plan this week. So yeah, I'll be there. Are you going?
No.
Yeah. Good for you.
Like I went back when we were with Twit, and yeah, it was a whole thing, and everybody seems to like woo CES, and I just
Eh,
was like, I just remember looking at it was going back to the products that were kind of before people wanted them, like
mhm.
the certain televisions and other things. Like I was
Yeah.
like, everybody was all like, these are the best, it's amazing, and I had to do all these interviews with people who were like
Mhm.
selling their stuff, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do these interviews anymore. This isn't.
It's a thing.
I don't want to talk with a marketer. I want to talk with.
well, that's
I want
I
to
approach
talk with the
CES.
engineer.
Yeah. I approach CES very selectively. I'm there to cover, like, tell people, like, okay, here are the interesting things. And then I go to the press
Yeah.
events and I look for the stuff that's like, okay, that's new and small and interesting.
Yeah, and
you know,
possibly usable, or it might
yeah.
give it some time, and somebody's gonna copy it. And
Yeah, the last one I actually attended in person, there was a really tiny startup that was showing wireless power running a model train. And they were really upfront about, like, yeah, this is totally line of sight. It's a really low voltage. This is pretty much all it can do. But, it might be good for automatic soap dispensers, or door locks. They're like, but these are the advances we're hoping to make. And it was just this year that company finally started shipping a product where they made some of those advances that he was hoping to make. So it's stuff like that kind of I look for, and it's like, okay, that's cool. That's fun.
I think it is cool when people make things that end up being usable. But now I am also on the wireless power is not. I mean, wired power is not efficient. Wireless power is even
incredibly inefficient.
Less efficient than wired power. So why? And if
we clean up the energy source, that's not a big deal. If I got a solar panel that's that's powering my wireless, I don't care. So there's
if we get fusion, it's fine.
Or if we can fusion it or wind power it, or wind power just passed coal in the US, I think.
Yeah, it did.
Is that right? Yeah.
They've been shutting down coal plants, and there's been a lot of hubbub about that. Solar also is becoming, the photovoltaics are becoming even more efficient. Like they keep coming up with new materials.
I've had mine for 5 years, and I almost feel like I need to replace them because they're half as efficient as the ones I can get now.
Yeah, but that you have to make your money back before you invest in a new one.
I think 5 years was the break-even point for me.
Right.
So yeah.
There you go.
Now
Daniel Smith says, I see a use case in medical tech for wireless. I see that too. I think that's yeah. But anyway.
Absolutely.
Solar. You live in the LA area, so you have sun.
You probably have more solar power generation capability than you think, but it won't be the same.
No,
that's why you would take more than 5 years to make your money back.
Oh yeah, no, my house is like on now it's on a side of a hill. I don't remember. I forgot the compass, and it's the sun. In the winter especially, it just barely goes over the top of the hill.
You have your own version of polar night.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm like outside at 3:00 in the afternoon, and I'm like, it's like 7 or 8 p.m. Am I supposed to go to bed now?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening?
You could still generate some power with that, but whether it's worth the trouble or not becomes a real question.
Yeah, the investment in that. Yeah, but if you get the more efficient then it becomes something that's more likely.
I always recommend people go to Energy Sage and just do the calculations, because my friends and relatives in Illinois were like, oh, well, I live in Illinois, we can't do it. I'm like, just look it up, and they're always like, oh, I generate more than I think. It sounds like you're in a particularly shady situation.
Number one, I live in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah,
Number
so you're
two,
not getting as much sun to begin with.
Number two, I live in the lee of a hill.
Yeah.
Surrounded by
you're
trees.
double whammied.
I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. I'm in a forest. And
And
then in the
there's
wintertime,
that
I'm like,
horde
yes,
of griffins that's hovering over you at all times. Like, yeah, it's just yeah.
Actually, yeah, it's crows and coyotes, but yeah, I get it.
Flying coyotes. Hordes.
That's what we're doing.
Now
We're
I'm
doing a
imagining
breeding
hordes of
program up here.
crows, Yeah.
Coyotes.
Oh, wow. That's going to give me nightmares. I really do. I'm friends with the crows in my neighborhood because I know they're smart. And so I treat them with respect. And it really does, like, they hate my neighbor who shoots them with salt pellets. And so they like go and they tear up his roof and like pull off wires and stuff.
Yeah, and if you just talk to him and be like, "Stop messing with the crows," they'll
Don't shoot
stop
the crows
messing.
with salt
Don't-
pellets.
Like, start being nice to them, and
Yeah.
they'll be nice to you. They're
Mhm.
just, they see you as a villain.
Mm-hmm.
You're a villain in the crow novellas.
Yeah. There's like a silhouette of you standing on an old decrepit cemetery gravestone.
Caw, caw. Oh my God. Feed them all the food, except if they bring their whole murder, which we started doing up here. We bought this house this last year.
Mhm.
When we were down in the southeast of Portland, we had a little group of crows, and they were a little family, and they were cute.
Mhm.
And occasionally they brought a little larger
Mhm.
social unit along with them, and it was nice. It was great.
Yeah.
We moved here, and we do have a little local family. That's good, but the murder that comes is so big. It's like this horde descending from the sky. It's like,
You should talk to Veronica about that. She had the same thing up in
Darkness.
Vancouver where she was feeding the crows and then suddenly like she has a video where it was like a Hitchcock. Like, yeah.
yeah. And they have like this one call that they do. It's like 3 or 4 caws that they do. And if they do 3 or 4 caws, that means that they're calling all of the others to come.
Like
And so-
everybody come.
Everybody, this is the place to be. And then, oh gosh, you can have hundreds in your driveway, covering the street, in the trees, staring through your windows.
Yeah. That's a little
Yeah.
much.
There's one, the family that we have gotten to know over the last year. There was one we called Baby Crow, and we got to know Baby Crow because Baby Crow had a little bit of white on him. And Baby Crow would come and started sitting at various points outside of windows where our window shades were open to let us know that it was there. It'd just be like, "Hi,
Baby crow.
baby Crow's here. Chuck,
Yeah.
chuck.
What's up?
What's
How you been?
I'm Baby
Got
Crow.
any meat?
Can you feed me something? I like
Yep.
food." Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Paul Disney, don't start trouble with that lot.
Yeah.
Just
Just
don't
go
start
talk to them. Just go up and be like, "Hey, what's up? Look, I see you're digging up my front lawn. I'd prefer it if you didn't do that." And then see what happens. They may not speak your language, but they kind of pick up your inference.
Just go out, make friends, throw a bunch of mealworms in your
Yeah.
front lawn, and just, go with
Or,
it.
or throw them over on the sidewalk and be like,
Or
that
throw them
over
in
there.
your neighbor's lawn.
with your neighbor's lawn. That's evil, Kiki talking.
There's a little bit of that inside me. I want you to
yeah.
know.
It's
Just a
inside of
little
all of
tiny-
us.
It's inside all of us.
Depends on the neighbor too, right?
That's the
I have
exact
such
point.
good neighbors now in this neighborhood. Thank
Yay.
goodness. My old neighborhood, they were fine, but they were not like this.
It's good to have good neighbors. Now,
Yes, very thankful.
my
for
neighbor,
that.
oh my gosh, he listens to the podcast. He knew me before I moved into the house. He is an engineer who worked on lasers, and he is the most awesome dude. I'll just
Ah,
be taking
that's
my
cool.
garbage out, and we will start talking about like fusion companies and the potential for like small fusion reactors to really become
Nice.
like regular. It will start talking about synthetic biology, like in the driveway. Like this, I have the best neighbor.
That's great. That's so good.
I'm like, hi, Gordon. And he'll be like, no, I'm just painting or I'm recalking my windows. And I'm like, that's awesome. And he'll be like, so what about this? And I'll be like, oh, well, that. Okay, yes. And there we go.
And you're off. Oh, that's cool.
Oh, yeah. He's like, yeah, he's fantastic. And his wife puts up with him very well.
Oh.
Mary's wonderful also. I need to go on a walk with Mary, actually. Because I know I haven't talked with Mary as much, but there's got to be a lot behind
deep
it.
waters.
Yes,
Yeah, walking Sawyer the dog is really what gets me to know folks in the neighborhood. I know all the dogs in the neighborhood.
I don't walk my cats, so
you should.
They would
They'd
get
love
eaten by
it.
coyotes, and
Not
I would be
usually,
sad.
not every day.
Not every day. Maybe only on Fridays.
Coyotes take Fridays off. That's the safe day.
Yeah, but walking a dog, seriously, you go out, you have to get out once or twice a day, go for the walk. Howdy, neighbor.
I know Bowie the dog and Milo the dog and Streen and
do you know
Ruby.
their owners' names?
No. Actually, I know a few of them. I know a few of them. But not most of them, to be honest.
That's awesome. I know your dog. That's great.
Yep. Milo's mom. Ruby's mom.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so much like taking
Taco's
your toddler
dad.
to the playground.
Yep.
I would take Kai to the playground when he was younger, and I'd be like, oh, there's this kid, and not remember the name of the parent at all. Yeah.
There's a thing. I don't know if you had this experience where parents exchange phone numbers and the names in your contacts are just Kai's mom. Like you have the phone number, but not the person's name.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
That's
real. Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
I have many of these, and
Okay,
a few
good.
of them I have adapted as the years have gone on, and I have
And
gotten to know the people and learn names. Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right, it's 10:30. I need to go make sure my child is in bed because he has school tomorrow, and he has a tendency to stay awake without the proper parenting.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Go to bed.
A little wag of the finger. Yeah.
I try. And I know you need to make sure Sawyer's asleep. Make sure
Sawyer will be asleep wherever he is, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
Good.
But thank you, Kiki, for having me on. This was super fun.
It was really, really fun. Wonderful to chat with you a bit before, a bit after, and also to
Likewise.
do the show with you. Really, just wonderful. Really enjoyed it. I hope you have a good holidays, and
you too.
Let's not take a year to get back in touch again.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do a crossover again. That was fun.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Maybe Blair will bring her baby.
We could have Roger bring his kids too. We could do a baby crossover.
Oh, it would be kids, tech and science kids hour. There we go. I bet Roger's kids would be awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. I bet. Say hello to everyone on the
All right.
DTNS team for me. Say
Will
hello to
do.
Eileen. Give a little head scrub to Sawyer for me.
I will. Yes.
Give a little head scrub to yourself.
Okay.
Kiki says good night. Sleep well for more than 4 seconds.
I will. I will definitely sleep more than 4 seconds.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for being here. Thank you for chatting. We really, really appreciate everything, all of you in the chat rooms and the Discord and all. And if you are just watching and getting to this later, no matter what, stay safe, stay stealthy. Yes, stay stealthy, stay healthy, and stay curious. And also lucky, because that's a good thing too. See you next week.
Bye.
Good night.